Okay, all
I'll
right.
get my coffee. Is that all right?
You can get your coffee. Of course you can. Of course you can. Hello, Anne.
Hi, Katie.
Hope you're well.
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I am very well, thank you very much.
Good.
I've been following your work for a number of years now, and for people who've not come across your work before, how would you describe your style of art?
Well, I do mixed media textiles, so they're a mixture of different techniques, including printing, transfer, but lots of stitching. So I use heavy machine embroidery, hand stitching, and collage. When I started doing these mixed media embroideries, I really looked at nature first of all, and I looked at plants and flowers and close-up details of natural forms, because drawing's always been quite an important part of it. So that led into my first book, Textile Nature, my first solo book. And then through that, one of the themes in the book was folk art, so I wanted to sort of research that in greater depth. But it's always been an influence in my work, because when I was growing up, I loved looking at, I grew up in Canada, and I loved looking at the sort of native craft and craft from America, which is very close. We're on the border of America, so sort of primitive work from the folk art tradition of New England is really important in my work as well. So I've just started this little piece, which is an apron. I don't know if you can see it here. It's
Yes,
an apron. This is just at the joining stage, so everything's been stitched on, but it's all going to be hand stitched as well. So it's got to have some more free motion going around the different shapes, and then some hand stitching in the background. And it's going to be part of a project, another project, which is an actual sewing box. So this is going to be the lid of the sewing box. It's quite ambitious. I'm doing the components of it separately because I love covering objects. I don't know if you can see at the back. If I just squish around a bit. There's a boat here, a little boat. If you can see that. And there's some things hanging up here. So there's some bits of embroidery, and there's a suitcase here, which was one of the pieces for my last knit and stitch exhibition. I did some suitcases. So I love covering bags and satchels. I don't know if you can see that there. So I love covering objects as well as just working flat. It's part of what I really enjoy doing. I think it's probably the fine art training coming out as well, and thinking about how you can connect ideas with objects and stitch as well. So the stitch is important, but it's not the only thing. It's very important, the feel and the look, but it's also the idea of what's behind it.
Well, I'm going to put all the information to do with your website and how people can find your books and things. It'll be in the video description below, so people who are listening to this and watching this, they can check that out.
Thank you.
And I see you've got a lovely sewing machine there.
Yes.
What sort of threads do you use in your work?
I've got a few sewing machines. I tend to use overlocker thread for the sort of netting effect that I do on top of my work. So I go through a lot of thread. You can see I've got quite a few things of overlocker thread, because I use this sort of netting, almost like a finishing stitch over the top of things, just to keep layers together, to hold it together. I also use embroidery thread, so I use Madeira and different types of embroidery thread and hand stitching thread. I love perlé cotton, and I tend to do the hand stitching at the end once I've done the netting stitch. So I get all the pieces of fabric together and stitch over them, and then bring out various elements with hand stitch or free motion embroidery as well.
Now, you've already mentioned that you publish books, and I believe
Yes,
got one coming out this year.
yes, a new one coming out, fingers crossed, in October, and people are actually already quite excited about it, which is lovely. It's called Textile Travels, and it's about working from inspiration that really is about anywhere close to you or further away. So it could be something you see on your daily walk that inspires you to make a beautiful piece, or it could be a memory of a trip that you took somewhere exotic, or even not that far away, even like a train journey. I think textile artists are really good at expressing narrative, aren't we? We're good at thinking about ideas and expressing them in different ways, and hopefully this book shows you the different ways that you can do that.
Something I was going to mention as well, you know, the 100 Hearts exhibition that the
Yes.
Guild did. I
Yes.
don't know if you know, I did a video for the Embroiderers Guild, and I bought some pieces, and I bought yours.
Well, that's really special. That's my grandmother's family in Canada. So it's based on the soldiers. Now, the thing is, I found this photograph that's on it, and I nearly had a fit because they're sitting around this table with a cloth on it that I've got the same cloth that I found in Italy, of all places. It's a sort of cut work thing. I've never seen it anywhere else. And this was in 1918. They were in France. And these boys were from Northern Ontario, which is like being from the middle of nowhere. They were small town boys who just got dragged into this terrible thing. And you can see the look on their faces. You just think, what on earth did they go through, you know? So it was about them, but it was also about the women that were left behind. And my grandmother was left behind, her, you know, what they went through. So it's, yeah, thank you. That's lovely. I'm glad you got it. Went to a good home. And it was for a good cause too. I've got another one actually that I did. Let's see if I can reach up. Oh. That one. That was the companion one. So this went to an exhibition in Canada. It's got a doll on it. It says Northern Ontario Men in France, and there's some pictures of them on the back. But it was about, again, it was about the women at home and the buttons. So some of the buttons are from my grandmother's sewing box, and this was a lady cooking, and I just thought it was right for the piece, you know. But yeah, I loved making that heart. I thought that was one of the best projects they've done. Really loved it.
So tell me something about the books that you've published.
Okay, so my first book was Connected Cloth, which is a joint book with Cass Holmes, who many of you obviously would know about. And it was a really nice collaboration that we had for about 5 years together. And the book is really the story of what we did together, and it gives you ideas for working in groups. And as a result of that, the success of that, I was invited to write this book, which is my first solo book, Textile Nature, which is about working with nature, obviously. And it's such a huge topic. I could have written about 5 books on that subject. But what I really like about the book is that it's really about inspiration. So there are how-tos in it, but it's also really about looking for inspiration in just even a leaf, what you can do with one leaf, and also working with different groups that and different spaces. So I was artist in residence in a garden in Sussex. I worked with the RSPB fundraising and with their education department. So it's how you can incorporate nature and sort of environmental concerns, I guess, as well. So that was what that one was about. And then one of the chapters in Textile Nature was about folk art, and I realized I really loved everything to do with folk art. And I also love the primitive and the simple. And I think it's almost a philosophy of mine that because we've got photography, which can take things, you know, beautiful, perfect photographs, what I really want to encourage in my students and what I love myself is seeing like individual quality of stitch. So if I said to a group of 10 ladies, do a running stitch, every single one would look different because that's your stitch. It's like your signature, isn't it? So I think the thing about folk art is it frees you up a little bit. It gives you a bit of it doesn't have to look photographic. It's the simplicity and the message behind it. And every country in the world has their version of folk art. So you know, wherever I looked, whatever culture I was investigating, they all had their own interpretation, but similar symbols. So you see the tree of life, you see hearts, you see birds, flowers, you know, lots of cultures have that, and it comes across in stitch really well. So that was really, I suppose, also looking at everyday things and appreciating the everyday. And then one of the chapters in this book was about traveling. So again, that led me on to the latest book, which is, as I said, is coming out in October. And it really looks at artists who use maps. So there's a way of using maps in your work, but also, as I said, inspiration from traveling. So, yeah.
One of my biggest regrets is that I didn't come and see you when you had your exhibition at the Knitting and Stitching Show. Was it at Harrogate you had it?
So I've done it twice. I did it in 2016 for Textile Nature, the launch of that book. I was at all three. I was at Ali Pali, Dublin and Harrogate. And then in 2018, we had the Beast from the East. I don't know if you remember. So I was at Olympia, and we lost a day at Olympia because of the weather. So they very kindly invited me to come to Harrogate that year as well. So I did Harrogate later on in the year. But it was the same exhibition, and it was for Textile Folk Art for this book, which was my last book. So it was called Folk Tales, and it was, we had a group exhibition. People made travel tags, which were these lovely little tags with anything to do with memories or journeys. And that's where the whole travel thing kind of started. And I had this installation with suitcases, and it was great. The feedback was amazing. And people really love a tiny project, don't they? I think that's what I would always say, start small, because you can put everything into a little project, you know. I know we both have just done this thing for the Embroiderers Guild as well. And just, I mean, I'm sure they're going to get some gorgeous things, because people just love a little project to do, and just something really special to work on. And it's easy, isn't it? It's portable. You can do it while you're watching something on television or box set or whatever you're doing. You know, it's good.
We bumped into each other last year at the Private View for the exhibition for the Society for Embroidered Work.
Yes,
and you had some beautiful work on exhibition there.
Thank you.
Are you currently making any more exhibition work for future displays anywhere?
Well, at the moment, fingers crossed, I've got a very big exhibition opening next year in January in Ruthin, at the Ruthin Craft Centre in Wales. So it's kind of to coincide with the book. So it's called, loosely titled, Anne Kelly Well Travelled, which I think is a good title. And the big piece, the central focal point of the exhibition is a boat that I've made from, well, it's not a real boat, but it's a model boat. But it's quite big. It's about 13 feet long, and it's fabric and paper. The inside of it is paper and the outside is fabric, and it's been laminated together. So it's quite, I love it. And it's features in the new book as well. So.
And is your art for sale at all?
Yes. So I've got an exhibition coming up in a gallery in Chichester, which is a charity one, which is great. And that's going online. So the information about that's on my blog. It's for a child bereavement charity, which is great. And then on my website, all my work that's available is on my website. And if people are interested, they get in touch. And I'm getting commissions and things all the time. So it's great, really.
Thank you very much for your time today, Anne.
Thank you, Katie. And stay well. And I look forward to seeing you when everything's back to normal. Thank you.